I want to please God, is what Paul said, and that's what the believer is to do, please God. Then he moves on in verse 5 and speaks of a disciplined athlete. He says, if anyone competes in athletics, he's not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. You can't break the rules and get crowned lawfully. Oh, you can get crowned for a moment. Kind of like Rosie Ruiz. Some of you might remember, if you have a memory that goes back many years, who ran in a marathon and was crowned the champion. She won the race, and it turns out that she hadn't run the entire race. She started it, and then she got a ride apparently to another place, and then waited for a little while, and then finished the race, and she was crowned as the winner of the marathon. And everybody was saying things like, she doesn't look like she's run 26 miles. Her body doesn't have that look of somebody who is running near death, and to run this kind of time, and we didn't even see her on the course. How did she end up in the front? Well, it turns out that she had cheated. She could get crowned for a moment, but not lawfully, because it was taken away from her. And anybody who cheats to win never really gets crowned lawfully, even though they may not be discovered even in this lifetime. But what he's speaking about here is the reward of somebody who actually competes lawfully. And he's pointing out very carefully that we as a disciplined athlete follow God's rules so that we might have mastery and win the prize. Now, it's interesting how he speaks concerning that prize. I want you to see verse 5, how he uses the word crowned. He is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. The crowns, you see crowns that are given to believers all through the New Testament. And these symbolize our love and faithfulness to Jesus. It's a picture of a reward. In 2 Timothy in chapter 4, verse 8, he speaks about the crown of righteousness. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 4, he speaks of the crown of glory. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 10, we see the crown of life. But here, Paul is speaking of what would be called the victor's crown. It's the one who competes in athletics. He uses the same illustration in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 and 25, because there he says, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? And he goes on to say, run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. They do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. So he was using the athletic games of his day. There were two basic major events that the Greeks were familiar with. There were the Olympics, which they still have to this day, and they had what are called the Isthmian Games. The Isthmian Games were like the Olympics, but were held in Corinth. And so that's why Paul would write to the Corinthians and speak concerning these games. Those who competed in those games would actually devote 10 months of their lives to heavy training. And while they were training, they would abstain from certain foods and certain things and certain drinks. And they did it so that they could ultimately stand there receiving the reward, which would be a wreath that would ultimately just fade and die, because it was already dead when given to them, because it was just a cluster of leaves. And they did it so that they could have a temporary fame and possibly some finances, and people would recognize them on the street and all of that. And for them it was a wonderful thing. And they would compete that way, and they do so lawfully for a temporary thing. And that's what Paul is saying. They do it for a perishable crown. They do it for the temporary reward. I mean, if I were to ask some of you in this room, who won the 100-meter dash in 1960 whatever, 68, hardly anybody would know who won it, in the Olympics. Why? Because, that's a long time ago, and most of you weren't even born at that time, and those who were born at that time pretend that you weren't. And the fact is, you were. And you remember, you might have even run in it, as I'm looking at you. But who cares? That's the whole thing. Who cares who won the boxing, heavyweight championship, got that gold? Who cares ultimately? Because even Sugar Ray, who happened to be one of my favorite boxers, he's 50 years old now, and he can only look back at what he did so many years ago. And we see the highlight reels, and we see these things, and he's got a beautiful home, and he has his Contender Series and all of that. But his athletic prowess is gone. It's been gone for years. It's perishable. You can walk into his trophy room, and he has one set there on his mansion. And you can walk into the trophy room, and you can see all of those things and those pictures and the various things that he has as memorabilia. But tell him to strap on some gloves and go into the ring with even a third-rate fighter today, and he couldn't do it. Why? Because the guy would beat him up, because he's over the hill. That's the way it is. That's life, and that's what Paul is saying to us. Listen, you want to strive for mastery? Strive for that which is eternal. But you want to run around with your little wreath that it's going to perish, it's going to fade with the use. People are going to say, man, I remember when you were an athlete. When did you get a gut like that? Then that's your reward. That's your reward. You get to the point where you still wear the same size pants. They just sit lower. That's the way it is, you know. When do you do? Oh, you're a guy. I mean, come on. Christians are not to run for short-lived fame or comfort. They serve the Lord for eternal rewards, the crown that does not deteriorate. He says, if you want to be used by the Lord, set your sights on the eternal. And then finally, in verse 6, he speaks of the hard-working farmer. And this is a farmer who is to labor energetically. He says the hard-working farmer must be first to partake of the crops. Hard-working farmer. So sloth has no place in a minister or a believer's life. Laziness is not rewarded by God. If you're a farmer, which I don't know, perhaps we have some who farm in this room, you know that you prepare the ground. You know that you plant the seed, you cover the seed, you maintain the seed, you weed, you do so much work. And you also know that the amount of crop that you receive is going to be basically equal to the amount of work and seed that you place in it. If you go out there and you have one grain of corn and you drop it in, don't expect an entire row of stock. It doesn't happen that way, because you basically reap what you're sowing. And so if you put a lot of work into it and you maintain that crop, and you're out there in the morning and you're chasing off the crows and the various other critters that come and try and eat up that crop, if you do that on a daily basis and you make sure it's watered and cared for, you're going to have a good crop if you do it right. That's the point that he's making. Be a hard-working farmer. You know, sometimes somebody gets saved and they think in a month or two that they're going to be equivalent to Billy Graham. They're going to be anointed and knowledgeable. It just doesn't happen that way. It takes discipline and work to grow in the things of the Lord.